And now we've got something a little different for you. We've got a group of modelers in On30 that we want to introduce and have them talk a little bit about their hobby of model railroading in On30. In my opinion, I hear more about On30 than I do any of the other narrow gauge scales. I think it's extremely popular right now. It's grown tremendously since I first heard about it, and that's been many years ago by now. But it seems to be the kind of an organization, or not an organization, a group of people who I think that you will see are obviously having a great deal of enjoyment and fun in our hobby. So with that said, I'd like to introduce the person that's going to be the host and moderator for this segment, and that's Steve Sherrill. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, what is On30? A lot of people want to know that. Sometimes we don't even know ourselves. It's such a freelance operation that at one time we had a saying, we don't have any rules. We kind of maintained that for a while, but then we got caught up and we started having a couple of rules anyway, you know. Nothing's without rules. But the popularity really started when a large manufacturer named Bachmann got into producing locomotives, cars, at a very reasonable rate. We started the transition. A lot of people transitioned from smaller scales into the On30. On30 is 1/4 inch scale and 30 inches between the rails. Bachmann sold it as operates on HO gauge track. Yes, you could run it on HO track, no question. Some of the modelers actually just took their HO buildings off, put O scale buildings on, and ran On30 that way. Some of them scratch built everything. Others kind of maintained prototypes, but there are very few prototypes in 30 inch. So it's mostly a freelance kit bashers, scratch builders type of operation. Tonight, I'm going to have some modelers who you may know some of them, you may not know them. I'm going to even introduce an On30 family. This family models together. They travel together to train shows. They're youth. They're 9-year-old, 13 years old, mom and dad. And of course, I'm also going to try to go with some international flavor here with Ian Fengus telling us about how he went around with his dad. And his dad was an On30 modeler. So I'd like to go first with Ian because I don't know what time it is there in Australia. So Ian, if you're available, could you give us some stories about your dad taking you to train shows and exactly what's going on in Australia as far as this scale and gauge?
Oh, hi, Steve. It's nice to actually see your face. It's just turned to, I've just had a coffee. I just went upstairs and had a coffee. Tim, can you just close the door? Oh, sorry, I've got a friend over. Look, On30 is an interesting scale for us because we have one of the biggest 30-inch running lines in the world. Because Victorian had the narrow gauge, which is still operating under the puffing billy envelope. But they had 4 quite long narrow gauge lines that ran on 30 inches, and that's the Haskell does the NA class and also all the wagons and all that sort of thing. I started basically model railroading. Well, I grew up with it. My father was building TT scale when I was a little boy. And the reason he stopped doing TT scale is we used to play with our little matchbox cars running down his hill and breaking all his fences. So he put it away. And unfortunately, his TT scale was, he used steel other than nickel silver, and it rusted, and it was ruined. Then in 1970, he decided to use his TT scale stuff to build Queensland. He's always been a Queensland modeler, so he was either building in S scale, which was using the HO mechanisms or double O mechanisms to build Queensland 3'6". Then, I don't know what it is, he met a guy and he got interested in a line called Budrum Tramways. Now, it's the actual, you can actually still walk part of the Budrum Tramways. I actually shared photos last year of it. It ran from the main line at Palmwoods, the Queensland main line, from Palmwoods up to a hill. And the little village is called Budrum, and it's just above the Sunshine Coast. So it's literally 10 minutes from the coast. And he built this gorgeous little diorama, and it was it had the Telco trestle and station and the overbridge on Telco Road. He built that, and I helped him as a young man of about 12, 13. I helped him, and that's what started my interest in trains and narrow gauge especially. And then a little bit later, I was up the coast with him, and he got access to a gentleman who owned a caravan park up there at a place called Forest Glen, called, I can't think of his name. And he actually took us up the right of way. No one was doing it. It was basically you walked on private land. And he took us up there, and you can actually hear the steam train sort of in your head. It closed in 1935. Also, as a child, Dad used to take us up to the running steam trains off 2-foot gauge up at Nambour Mill. So all of that. And then I got teenager and I got into girls and other things and cars, and I was building model Formula One cars and model tanks, and then I ran into a group of guys who were doing wargaming, and I just left Dad's train hobby. I let him go off and do it. I saw him a couple of times at shows and that sort of thing. He'd go and exhibit at shows and put out his narrow gauge locos or whatever he was doing. And then in 83, somebody exhibited some 7mm English scale, which is using HO track, but using 7mm to represent 2-foot gauge for the cane things. I thought, oh, gee, that's interesting. And then in 1987, my dad and he knew I was painting figures. So he said, why don't you show the guys at the train show, and we'll do a workshop, basically, all for the 3 days of a train show. Brisbane has always had a train show. It translated to a hobby and train show, and then they lost all the funding of that because somebody took all the funding to a volunteer organisation, and they restarted it. And he took me in 1987, and I sat there for 3 days and showed people how I painted figures. Mm-hmm. The unfortunate part was, Steve, there was 2 beautiful narrow gauge layouts there. One was by Bob Reed, who was the beginner. You've heard of the Narrow Gauge Down Under magazine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Bob Reed did this magnificent ON 3-foot American. The modelling was just to die for. And here he is watching me paint figures, and he's giving me figures to paint. Can you paint this for me? Can you paint this for me? And it was just this absolutely, and it just caught me because it had these trees that went from the ground to the ceiling and all the roots and the roots coming through the embankments. And it's just beautiful, you know. That was 87. And then in 88, my dad said, why don't we build a layout together? So that was it. That was my start in On30. And I haven't stopped doing it. I've done exhibition layouts. I think we've built 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 train layouts for ourselves, and we built 4 for others. And we exhibited them, and it was just amazing. Like you said, Steve, Bachmann really grabbed me because I was only building diesels at the time. I couldn't build a steam like I wasn't good enough for that sort of work. And then they produced the 260, and then the little porters, and that they caught my attention because they're gorgeous little things. But I always wanted a Shay, and because around me in the area of Queensland I live, there's literally within about 100 kilometres of here, about 6 Shays that used to run around in Queensland. Mainly 2 foot, but 3 of them were 3'6", and 2 of them were actually 2'6", 30 inch. So, you know, and then from there, I built them, and then about 6 years ago, I was talking and giving teasing, and that's where I started the figure painting for other people for figures.
Are there a lot of On30 layouts? Is it really a popular scale there where you are? I know it's popular in England. I see a lot of micro layouts in England. Since
about I'd say it was a particular gentleman called Steve Malone. He got it's really kicked off, and then when Bachmann produced the porters, I saw about every exhibition we had all around. There was one in Toowoomba, there was one in Brisbane, there was one down the Gold Coast. There was at least one layout.
Yeah.
Unbeknown to us, in Victoria, there was huge. It's huge in Victoria because they do prototype. There's some world class. Alan Rocket has a train layout that's absolutely world class in On30. A lot of it is brass and scratch built. He builds his own carts and wagons, beautifully done. Then we had guys like Jeff Knott. You would have heard of Jeff. He did Muskrat Ramble and Smuggler's Cove and all of those sort of things. They're very well-known layouts. They're all On30. Then we had John Hunter was doing a beautiful American, what's it called? The runs down to the sea up in Washington. Sorry, just he was doing it. And then I have there's Dan Pickard, Rod Hutchinson,
Richardson.
Ian. Yeah, these guys are all doing, you would have seen photos of their stuff from the narrow gauge convention. They're all doing magnificent train layouts in On30.
Yeah, now you guys tend to be mostly scratch builders. They're pretty spread out because of your country, the way it's, settled.
Yes.
In the U.S., we're closer as far as the number of modelers. In other words, you may have an On30 guy, 5 miles away, you might have 10 within, 25 miles. So it's easier to be more popular here than where you are. But because of the Zooms and FaceTimes and things like that, it's much easier to share our experiences than it was 10 years ago. And so I get to communicate with you and you get to, answer my dumb questions. But so I think that, it brings us all together to share what we know, and we help each other. And I think this is very important. I think it's one thing that we have in On30 is, even though I may think you're the greatest, model builder in the world, you don't think so. That kind of thing. We're all down to earth. And I think, and you're willing to share everything that you know with me, and I'm likewise.
Which isn't much.
Just yeah, exactly.
Ian isn't one of the main industries in Queensland.
Yeah, I want to now find Michael in a second. I don't say again. Queensland.
Ian,
say it again.
Ian, isn't one of the major industries in Queensland, isn't it sugar?
They've actually got more lines, more kilometres in 2 foot than under standard gauge, which is 3'6" in Queensland.
And it's primarily because of the sugar industry?
Or because it started off, we have 2 types of narrow gauge lines. There's Shire, which literally the Shire Council owned and paid for the trains to run in their Shire. Yeah. That's where you've got Mulgrave, you've got Innisfail, you've got quite a few Shire tramways. And that's why they're called tramways, because they weren't owned by the government. And then out of that came a lot of the sugar mills. Above me in Nambour was the Moreton Mill, and then you went up to Maryborough, and then you went up further. You went to Bundaberg, was a big area of, and still is, sugarcane, gin. Then you went up to Serena, Bundaberg, Mackay is another big area. And then you went further north, Tully and all these sort of things. Yeah. It's a huge industry, very, very large, and absolutely beautiful locos.
And frankly, for On30, that's a perfect industry for your country.
Yes.
It leads itself. It's unfortunately, because of the mass of people that are, we don't have a lot of people in Australia.
Yeah.
And to do the industry it's just not. There's not enough people to build. They're having enough problems just to build Queensland stuff. So we tend to convert American stuff or scratch build it. I'm lucky. I've got 2 Queensland locos produced by a gentleman years ago, but they're very expensive. You're talking $2,000 for a loco.
Wow.
So, yeah, you sort of get ouch. That's why when Kieran did those beautiful NAs, the Victorian, and everybody's complained about them, we thought they were cheap at $400.
Yeah.
That's Australian, like $200 Australian?
No, it was $400 Australian for an NA.
Okay.
At the other locos, because they were so limited, they were kits and all that sort of thing, and you had to get them put together.
Yeah. You guys have a lot of battery power down there too, a lot of dead rail.
Yeah, very popular down south.
Very, very popular.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish I knew more about it, because I would go dead rail tomorrow.
Well.
So you have another guest on, Steve. Brian and the family is on.
Oh,
okay. Right. Okay, Brian. Why don't you introduce your family, and then I will ask you a few questions.
All right, we'll try to answer them.
Okay.
Good, Steve. My My name is Brian Clayto. This is my youngest son, Michael. My oldest, Andrew, and my wife, Christy, is just standing off screen. Some of you may have seen her earlier. I've been involved with On30, first introduced to it and back in 2004 timeframe by some friends, and got pulled over to the dark side about 2005. And modeling in On30, a lot of kit bashing, some scratch building, a lot of camaraderie, with Steve and Dan and Les and, some of the other guys I've gotten to know over the years. We are a modeling family. My wife, blessed that she supports our hobby, and we drag her. We do all the train shows as a family. It's a family event. We all enjoy trains, so it all works out pretty good. So.
Well, I know the two boys have been around a long time and going to train shows, and you've got pictures of them when they were probably, 5 and 10, asking questions of the modelers, learning. They're always inquiring as to how do I do it? How do I do it? Let me do it. And everybody just says, hey, we'll show them, because they are the future. They're going to be the people taking our place when we're gone, and they'll be sharing. It's very important, to let these young men go and be around us. And I show them everything I can, and I know other people do too. Now, what I did was, when I said I wanted to do this, and Jim and I worked out a date, I called Brian and asked the boys if they wanted to build a micro layout and to show the skills of their ages, and then show it tonight, and explain how they did it, and, just a little bit about it. I will say we had a meet this last weekend, and they ran this layout for the entire weekend. So I don't know which one of you boys want to talk first, but show the layout, tell them what you have. You're on.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve. We're having some computer issues. So we're actually on our phone. While the call started, we set the layout up on the kitchen table with the backdrop and put some rolling stock on it. So we'll get to that here in a minute. But I'll let Andrew, he's 14 now. He can talk about the layout, how we started it, and how long we've been working on it.
Thank you, Dad. So one day we went out to eat, and early in the day we'd been sketching out plans on the module, just kind of thinking, what can we do for this? Because I'd been sketching out on paper, and Dad'd been sketching out on paper, just kind of goofing around, seeing what we could do. And we're sitting in the truck after we come out of the restaurant, and Dad gets a phone call from Steve. And they talk, and I'm wondering what they're talking about. Dad comes off the call and says, how would you guys like to work on that module and get it ready for the June show? We went home and put down the foam road bed. Next day, we were staking down track and gluing it down.
Oh, wow.
So we started, the boys did everything from laying out the track plan, setting up where the sidings were going to be. They started laying the track. The only thing that I really did on the layout was the cutting of the rail and helping glue it down. This way it was smooth. But everything else on the layout, they've done all the scenery. They've done the foam carving. They've made the messes in the basement that has drug up the steps, etc. But it's just been a steady progress on it. We took it to the meet at the April O Scale show in Harrisburg that Al Judy. And we help out with that show as well. If you look at on the On30 railroading Facebook page, you'll see photos of the layout and the boys, in the staff shirts helping out. And I've just slowly been working on it. The past 2 weeks was kind of a mad rush because my work schedule, just trying to, getting enough time that we could both all be down there, and I could monitor what they were doing on the layout. And so it's still a work in progress, but it's a 2 foot by 42 inch long layout. Radius is between 8 and 10 inches, and they've been kit bashing and scratch building some locomotives for it, and also some rolling stock. So they're having a good time with it. Michael, just what did you start doing over at the show? What Les's wife Ann was showing you?
Yeah, I started painting a figure of Dan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
watch it, Ian. He's coming.
Oh, I know. I've got competition. Love it. Love it.
And this is right up your alley. So we've been.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's so good. You must be so proud of that.
Yep, he did that at the Narrow O meet there this past weekend. So
yeah, it was Les's wife and another guy was doing figure painting, weren't they?
Yeah, there were a couple people that were doing figures.
Bloom.
Yeah, Art.
Oh yeah, that's right. Art
was doing it. Ann was doing it. There's one other gentleman. I can't think of his name right now.
I saw that his name was there because there was a guy who shared that he'd painted his first figure there.
Yep. And Les Davis he created these figures. He's been doing all this. And Les has been working, Les and Ann and Art and all the guys and ladies that are involved here locally meaning up and down the East Coast and then
locally.
North America. Okay. Have been very accommodating of the boys. They do ask a lot of questions. They are very interested in the hobby. They got the addiction. I don't know from where. They must have got it from my wife.
Yeah.
They're very involved. Clem at one of the Lycoming On30 meets back in 2018, Michael was 4 years old. And, of course, she had photos of him talking with Steve and George Sarah and, Clem and Alan Carroll when he was still with us, and Alan Littlefield.
Oh, wow.
And, he got experience with them. Clem had him running a dead rail G-scale Davenport down to concrete, no tractor, nothing. He thought that was the greatest thing on earth. So now all I'm hearing about is for the past 5 years is dead rail. Come on, Dad, let's go down. So Steve's kind of helped out with that. So
Andrew's actually done dead rail from RC car. And I was April with my little micro there, and here comes this young guy up with. He said, "Let me show you this." And here was this chassis and RC car frame he had put together and operating. And I said, "Whoa, let me see this." So believe me, it caught my attention. So he's the dead railer now. He's one of us.
Yeah,
he's one of us now. But these young people are just interested, and you just want to take them and tell them everything you know. I mean, when I was young, it was different. Maybe we had one person at Christmas that might sit down and talk to us something, the Lionel layout. There was no small scale in 47 when I started. Not that I saw anyway. And then about 1952, when I started with HO, it was a little bit different. we had some stuff like that, and I was building layouts at that point. But when ON30 caught my eye, it really was like in the mid '80s. Everything was kit bash then. But I was lucky enough in my life to know Gordon North, who was one of probably the first 5 in ON30 in the whole world.
Yes.
And he and I were good friends. And he was well known and wrote 40 some articles for Gazette.
Yes.
Just a wonderful guy. And we used to talk, and he would come up to my house and do things, and he was just a great guy. I miss him a lot. But we talk about other things too, not just that. But ON30 is just something that you're on your own. You can do whatever you want, and it's acceptable. Yep. And the more whimsical it is, the more people like it.
Isn't that true?
Yeah, it's true.
Well, listen, do you think we ought to bring the other people in, Steve, that are here with you?
Well, Dan had to cancel tonight.
Oh, okay.
But I do have we're ON30 is going into 3D printing a lot now. Yes. And Bob Gelmacher, who is 3D prints a lot of ON30 stuff, and also custom prints other items. And we can talk to Bob. Bob, you want to give us and tell them what you're doing in ON30 and 3D printing?
Sure. I'd like to share the screen too. Well, maybe it's not going to share.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Can you see my screen, my blue screen?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Well, like Brian, I got into ON30 probably in 2004. I started collecting Department 56 houses, if anybody's familiar with those. And Bachman came out with a train set, which was ON30, and I bought it, and I just went down that track. So my railroad is called the Whiskey River and Carroll Creek ON30 Railroad. And let me get the PowerPoint up here.
We're actually watching your PowerPoint in the share. Just go ahead and move the slides forward and you'll be fine.
Okay. And for me, the 3D printing started out more of a curiosity than anything. I wasn't exactly sure where it was going to go, but what I found is that, like I say here, necessity is the mother of invention. And I never seem to have the...
Maybe you're not advancing your slides. Why don't you reshare your screen, the upper left. I don't know what something you shared, it's not advancing. I can stop you. Go ahead and reshare and share the upper left thing that says screen. That way we see what you see. So there's no way of screwing it up.
There.
Upper left.
My upper left here? Or are we opposite?
Upper left. So can you advance your slides? Advance your slide one. Yeah, see, we're just seeing the cover slide. I don't know why.
Can you see that at all?
No, so we hit the screen share, the green icon at the bottom.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're gonna run out of time too soon, so okay. I'm not going to do that at all. I'll do some other things. Anyway, I got into 3D printing, and what I found is the nice thing about 3D printing is that if something breaks or if I don't seem to have exactly what I need, I can always now make it. And I wound up meeting Steve, I guess, a couple of years ago, and looking at his layout. There's another friend of ours, Steve Fisher, down on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and he also has a very nice ON30 layout. And it became apparent that a lot of the things that Bachman puts out, we could probably very well go back and try to make ourselves. So what I did was I've created, and hopefully you'll be able to see these guys, my own rolling stock. So I probably will never buy another piece of Bachman rolling stock just because we can make it ourselves. On many of these, the only thing one here that I can't make are the wheels and also the couplers. So at a show that I was at recently, I wound up buying a whole bunch of wheels and a whole bunch of couplers. And one of the things that I wound up making and talking with Steve is smaller cars. Now, these are about 12 feet as far as size goes. We printed a lot of details on them. These are actually 2 truck cars, so they have 4 wheels on them. And we also have some that are just 4-wheel cars. Here's the same version in the flat car version. And
can I ask you a question? How much you use a CAD to draw those models? After you printed them out, how much more detail do you add to them after that?
Well, what I wound up doing, Jim, is I wound up printing a lot of detailed parts. Like, for instance, the if you can see right here, the brake wheel and a lot of the undercarriage parts.
Right.
So I'll print up a whole bunch of those, and then I'll add them as I feel appropriate. On these smaller cars, they don't have any undercarriage parts, but they do have the brake wheels, and it's hard to see on here, I know, but the details to mount those brake wheels.
Gotcha.
And then one of the other things that we just finished, and we were showing this up at the Harrisburg show, is these are water tenders that would go with climaxes or shays.
Yeah.
And there's 2 versions of these. One is the squared off version, which this is, and there's also a version that has rounded corners. And the tops come off, so I know for people that are doing dead rail, this would be a great place to put a battery and receiver.
Sure would.
And again, the only parts on these that we purchased were the wheels themselves and the couplers. At Steve Sherrill's suggestion, I actually went and took a look at the trucks that are on the Climax and then recreated those trucks with the 3D printer. But
what couplers do you use?
I'm using the Bachmann 148s.
Oh, okay.
I like the ones that have the whisker couplers, and they might not be 100% to scale for the ON30, but for my railroad, it does the job for me.
Steve, what about the rest of the ON30 guys? They all use the same couplers, or is there a variety, or what?
Well, some of them use the original Bachmann couplers, which a lot of them change out because you're just unsatisfactory. You don't perform good enough. And some use the KD number 5s. I know probably down in Ian's area, they probably use Lincoln Penn down there a lot. You know, we can't really do too much operation, meaning switching and uncoupling with those. It's a little more difficult, but there's a lot of, they're very appropriate for, you know, what probably you're modeling.
Yeah.
But really, it's each person's own choice. You know, you've got the undershanks, overshanks, long, medium, you know, whatever you need on your model.
Yeah.
People just pick and choose. But the whiskers are very nice. And I think they're reasonably priced, like $5 for 2 pairs, something like that here.
Yeah.
You know,
I bought them in bulk, so we got them a little bit cheaper.
But you know, Bob is producing, and so are other people making this. But you know, Bob is close by, and he'll do what I ask him to do, and
often under duress, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Bob, your 3D models are super impressive. I mean, you know, compared to how much time it would take somebody to build it out of wood or plastic or you know, the traditional ways that we're used to. I mean, your models are just unbelievably detailed, in my opinion.
Thank you.
How long did it take you to learn? Let me ask you, what CAD program do you use?
Yeah, I'm using a program by Autodesk called Inventor, and it's a high-end program, and it's fairly expensive. But what I found is that if you can prove student status, then you could use it for no charge at all. And what I did a couple of years ago is I took a couple of courses at the local community college, And so I'm still on their books as a student, and that allows me to renew my Autodesk subscription every year, and that works out really well. The nice thing about the 3D printing is that once you get the model done and once you get it where you want it, you can make as many as you want, and there's no additional upfront time. It's just a matter of actually printing the product. The upfront time could be considerable because, number one, most all of the programs have a fairly large and steep learning curve. So it took me probably a year to feel comfortable. But what I realized that if you can, in your mind, condense everything down to primitive shapes like spheres and rectangles and squares or cubes and cylinders, then you can mold all those things together to create the forms that you're wanting. So it's not so far-fetched to think that it would be able to make a locomotive with all the domes and everything else. I was watching the one fellow who was doing the trolley cars, and I just finished working on basically an enlarged Bachmann coach roof. Took a while to get the curves right, but now that I've got it, I can make as many of those as I want. So this is almost taken on a hobby as itself. And I probably spend more, matter of fact, I know I spend more time actually doing 3D printing and doing the design work than I do my model railroad. But that's the nice thing about being a model railroader. You can take it in any direction that you want to.
Are these rosin models that you're producing?
Pardon me?
Rosin models or what?
Well, I actually have a number of 3D printers, and one family of them are the FDM or filament printers. And they give, I think, a stronger chassis when you make them. But I also have a number of resin printers, and the resin printers give you much greater detail. So that's the way I built the water tender and a couple of the other features, because you can actually add rivets and everything else, and you can actually see them, and they look good.
How long does it take you to print a model?
That's a depends question. I can print something fairly small in a matter of minutes, but when I do my 3D printing with the resin printer, it could take maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But again, the nice part there is the build plates on the resin printers are about 10 inches in diagonal. And whether you put one piece on that or you put 10 pieces on that, it takes all the same amount of time to print. So once I start getting a design to where I want it, then I can put 6 chassis on that plate, and it takes the same amount of time as it does one chassis because it builds up layer by layer by layer.
I assume when you say that you get the model the way you want it, I assume that's trial and error, right? You do the drawing,
yeah,
you do a drawing, you print it out. If it's not right, you go back and you correct the drawing, you print it again. If that's not right, you go back, correct the drawing.
The number is 7. 7 iterations to get it where you want it.
Okay.
But, it's I find great joy in the custom design work, and I don't have any problem taking the time to do it. It keeps me off the streets.
Yeah.
And Jim, I'll make this offer right now is I put together a complete presentation on 3D printing, which goes more into the types of printers, the materials and all that type of thing. I gave that at a couple of conventions. I'll be happy to share that with the group if the group would like to see it sometime in the future.
Absolutely. We'd like to see it. Okay. Can you send me an email or just so I can get in touch with you and we'll work out a time?
Yep. I'll get in touch with you.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you, Steve.
Hey, Bob, when you went to your local library there in Carroll County,
was
that a laser or 3D printer that they had there you could use?
Both. They have a laser cutter that has a 36 by 48 inch bed. And, you might check around at all your local libraries, but the only thing that we had to do was take our own materials. And of course we have to do the design work, but the actual use of the laser cutter is absolutely free. So the decks that I have on most of my flat cars were all laser cut. And you can actually get that detail so you can put nails in the boards. It's really nice. But they also have a number of 3D printers there that you can use also.
what's the name you're using for your 3D printing company?
I'm calling my company Carroll Creek Scenics. And I'm much in the fledgling stage of getting that company going. But and we're doing trial and error to see whether the things that I'm making are things that people would like to buy.
How do you spell Carroll?
Carroll, Creek Scenics. And my contact information is Geldy, Geldy, at AOL.com. And if anybody would like to talk to me about 3D printing, they can call me on my cell, which is 410-926-4514. I'll be happy to talk your ear off about 3D printing.
Hold on a minute. What's your email? Geldy?
Geldy, Geldy
at
AOL.com.
And phone number?
410
Yep.
926
4514.
4514.
I'll give you a call.
Okay, I'm located in Mount Airy, Maryland, which is about 20 miles west of Baltimore.
Got it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Steve, what would you and your panel think? How difficult is it for a new modeler to enter into On30? Is this a hard group to break into, or what? How do you do it?
I don't think so. I mean, every modeling group has subgroups that are close together as far as where they live, or they share, a common interest in the type of railroading they're doing. Like we met a young guy at the train meet. Didn't even know he lived real close to another person. So we introduced them. Now he's going to be with our group when we Zoom. And we have a group that Zooms once a month, and each person talks and shares what they've done during that month. So we've kept it going even during COVID. And even during a scale change from the owner of the railroad that we visit. So we'll talk to anybody. Everybody is, if you're On30, you're one of us. We don't care. Really. I mean, it's unbelievable, the closeness that this group gets. I don't know of anybody who says, I don't want to deal with that guy, or anything like that. Everybody is here to share. I've never seen anything like it, and I've been around for a long time.
I've only run across one person that I asked for information about how I did photography and model railroading, and he said, I'm sorry, that's my profession. I'm not going to talk to you. That's in 30 years. And I've since become pretty good friends with the guy, so.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, it's like I've said before on here, I'm retired. My layout's open every single day. All you have to do is contact me, and you can come and visit my railroad. Unless I'm playing golf, then you won't be getting me.
What's the hardest thing for a new On30 modeler to do? I mean, there's got to be something that's a little different about On30 modeler. So I'm an HO modeler or I'm an S-scale modeler, and I've met you guys, and okay, I want to do On30. What's the main problem I'm going to have switching?
Well, I think that one of the biggest things is you can see it. I mean, I was an HO modeler for many years, and in 2004, into 2005, I saw the light, and I can't see going back. I think that one of the biggest things that, regardless of the scale, anytime you get into something, you see guys like what Steve's building, Art Bloomer or Alan Littlefield or Ian's doing with his painting. You can't come into it right off the bat and build something and expect it to look exactly like that, like what their quality of model. Because these guys have 30 years of experience or more and doing exactly what they're doing, and they perfected their hobby and their craft. You can't expect, and this is something I talk with my boys about all the time, is this is your first build. This is your second build. They get better. You learn from experience, just like the layout, the micro that we built. It's like experience. You make a mistake, you learn from it, you go on to the next area. So it's not going to be perfect. And a lot of people, including me, have issues with that every once in a while. So, but I guess the biggest.
I think the hardest thing for somebody has to realize is, like any new hobby, it can be expensive to start out. In other words, right now, the models are expensive because the major manufacturer has stopped producing. So we've been caught up with increased prices. Where we used to pay $10 for a car, now we pay $40. So,
and Steve, the other thing is that, when you go to a train show, and I'll take Timonium as an example, how many ON30 layouts do you see at Timonium? So a new modeler can't walk into a big show like that and expect to get overwhelmed by ON30. They have to seek it out. That's what I found. I mean, and the fact that Bachmann has really cut back considerably on what they're producing, you can't just go into any store and buy it these days. There's one store that I know of here in Maryland, Star Hobbies down in Annapolis. They have a tremendous inventory of ON30. And that's the reason why I am happy that I'm able to get into making my own, because I don't have to rely on Bachmann anymore.
I'd like to interject here a second on the cost. This is Tom Farrell. I'm a big ON30 modeler, as you all know. If you go to Amazon, you can find a dearth of starter locomotives. The Mogul, for example, which Bachmann must have produced by the 10,000 of them. I mean, there you can get an analog Mogul ON30 locomotive quite inexpensive. So there are entry-level locomotives available on eBay, on the Facebook. We have an ON30 marketplace. You can buy used stuff on there, quite inexpensive. So there's all different levels of entry points for these locomotives, but you can get into the hobby quite inexpensively.
Well, those locomotives that you're talking about, the 260s, they're going to have McDonald's on them or something like that.
Not necessarily. I have bought lots of. I do DCC now, but there's a lot of just black ones that are, they're on there, and you can always paint them.
Oh yeah, well, but you have to want that locomotive too.
But there's a lot of black ones on there.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. Yep.
And you can find on the regular marketplace. It doesn't have to be one of the train sites. I've come across, several listings for ON30 rolling stock and engines. Some Hawthorne, some theme trains, some not. But they're very reasonably priced, and
I'm still looking for the yard sale. The yard sale one with where somebody is getting out of the hobby. They want to sell, but
I bought one of the Hawthorne sets, and I didn't realize that it had 12 additions to it. We wound up paying $900 for it, and it sat for years and years. And I wound up selling it for $300. It was terrible. I really felt bad about it, but and it was all decorated with Thomas Kincaid painting. But if I can pick up a any color and any paint scheme Mogul, I'll buy it, because they're so easy they're good running machines, and they're easy to paint.
I just did an eBay search. There's 248 ON30 Bachmann locomotives on there, as low as $35 for a Mogul, and a black one as low as $100. I mean, they're there.
Yeah.
And if you go to Train World, you'll find that you can get a 260 with DCC and sound ready for 110 bucks.
Yeah, they're running the scale now. Yeah.
What
Look
about
look-
track? Can I use my HO track, or do I have to buy a special ON30 track? Or
HO
You
on
you
both.
can use HO track, and there is special ON30 track also, but it's the availability of some of the manufacturers of that is limited.
Yeah.
The Pico,
If you're real critical, the ON30 track looks much better in an ON30 world, but it runs absolutely fine on HO track. Absolutely.
You know, one of the premier modelers of ON30 is Al Judy, as everybody knows. And Al Judy runs straight up HO track, and it looks gorgeous.
He does.
We know he doesn't know what he's talking about. Come on.
So you can use
that.
You can use HO track, and if you ballast and weather it, it looks gorgeous.
It looks good.
Actually, if you cut the backs of the ties and remove about a third of the ties and slide them out, you still maintain the clamp and then when you glue it down, you still have the clamp to the rails, but the ties are now farther apart. And it looks much better.
yes.
Hey guys, we're talking about, cheap locomotives. Look in your HO stock. I mean, here's an AHM, $5 piece that with some styrene and out of the scrap bin and some HO parts and the RC
Guts.
car remote, maybe $20 in this locomotive. And that's the art of the ON30. That's what it started out as, is kit bashing. You don't have to buy something that's ready to run. Search in your box.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the fun of it, kit bashing.
And what I thought the real draw was to ON30 was the mechanisms were out there, mass produced, and then you scratch build the superstructure, whether it's a car, locomotive, whatever it was.
Well, you can do anything you want. That's
because
the fun of it.
Because the mechanism, the HO mechanism, was mass produced. It runs. It's ready to go. So all you got to do is create the O-scale superstructure, and you're ready to go.
That's why we couldn't figure out why Bachman had a good running diesel, but never did anything with it in ON30. They had the motor. It ran good. They never made a motor car. Or anything. Every mechanism.
What about structures? Do you have to change the height or anything? Say water tanks. Is that a different height for ON30 than an O-scale?
Well, standard gauge water tanks are really too high and too big for the capacity of the tenders for ON30. That's what I personally think.
Yeah, I'm scratch building all my stuff, just because I haven't found anything that I like commercially that does the job.
Yeah.
Well, I bought off somebody a ready to run $100, and it was from Puffing Billy. And it's absolutely perfect. And it was $100, and it was a 3D print, like you were talking, Bob, with some brass pieces in it. But then I've scratched built over a wooden blog a little tank of my own.
Mm-hmm.
I use scratch build. I use kits. I look around because I'm in the industry. I talk a lot to people who do it in my area. I know a lot of contacts, and there's a lot of people who do it. And you just, you only have to spend what you want. I like it. I've got quite a large layout, and some of the stuff I bought as kits, but I've had them for 20 years, and I've just changed them from different exhibition layouts. And then others, I've scratch built it because I wanted to, and I wanted to put it in there. So, and it didn't cost me huge amounts of money. It was a bit of plastic card and a bit of a bit of time and a bit of, you can even get clever models do O-scale paper that you just glue to cardboard and you can make buildings out of. So, and that's cheap. There's a lot of guys, I know a lot of guys in Queensland that do cardboard modeling.
Well, look what Trolls Kirk does with paper and cardboard. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, I was talking about Australian modelers, the famous Jeff Knott. Smuggler's Cove is made out of cardboard and timber. Balsa. This guy is, unfortunately, is passed on, but that guy's, bar none.
Look at all the manufacturers in Europe and England, particularly, that make card models. I mean, and there's a lot of modelers over there that's basically what they build with. That's their material of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so Steve, you got anything else you want to add here before we close it down, or?
Well, On30 can use all the O-scale structures. I mean, so there's a lot of fine O-scale structures.
Yeah.
Tom Scratchfield's all his. We just had some great modelers in On30. Just some great modelers, and a lot of the accomplished modelers have come to On30 because they could see it. It's cheaper, and it runs very good, very well. And they don't have to worry about any competition. Everybody is accepted, I mean, my layout looks different from Tom's. Other people's look different. You won't find two people modeling the same thing as you do in some of the other scales, where they're all modeling Santa Fe and they're modeling, the Loop or something like that. I've never seen two On30 layouts ever with the same location. So, I mean, we're just individuals who have a camaraderie and a common bond. We're willing to share.
Sounds good to me, guys.
You have to.
What our hobby's supposed to be.
You have to be around us to get the feelings, all I can tell you. The next time
we will corrupt you. We will corrupt you all.
It's nice to see families involved in the hobby. I think that's really special because I can't say enough about it. I think that's wonderful, and the more families that we can get involved in our hobby, I think the longer term outlook is going to be better for us. So I'm all for trying to do everything we can to encourage that.
The one thing that I did notice at the On30 meet that we just had is we didn't have many young people there. It's I don't think that. I don't know why we don't have any young people coming through. We're certainly willing to talk to the young kids and do all we can, but I know even when they were talking on the scholarship, if you ask Greg about it, he didn't get many applications or any applications. He got more interest in, new tracks modeling than he did as far as the scholarships. And the reason was there were no teenagers that were there.
Well, so this is the first year we've tried this. And, none of the organizations out there are trying to do what we're trying to do. We picked the STEAM program because it includes art. And because we're convinced that there's a real art to model railroading. And so we think that should be included in an advanced degree and further education past high school. And this is the first year that we've raised the money and decided to try to put forth these scholarships. And we're learning as we go. We need all the help we can get. And, Jeff Jordan came along and volunteered to do the pro bono work to get our 501c3. And in less than 30 days, he had our 501c3. So then, that was a major boost for us. And Phil is involved. Phil Edholm is involved in it. In fact, the scholarship for this year started out as Phil's idea. So, we're really encouraged with the number of people that we have. We'd like to have 3 times that many. But, the people like Al Judy who are giving us free space at their train shows, and we were at Amherst, we were at the Timonium show, we were at the O-Scale National, we're going to be at the NMRA National in Texas. We've been in California, all over the West, all over the East Coast in the various shows. So, we're trying to get the word out, but no one has been trying to encourage the young modelers by saying, there's a pathway for you for your education, and the modelers of today are willing to help you get that education by helping in the financial part of it. And I don't think there's a better way that we can say to young people to join our hobby than that. The other thing that I will say, and the reason that I agreed to be the ambassador for the Association of Professional Model Makers, for young modelers, there is a professional career in professional model making, if you so choose. And this leads to, from corporations, this leads down the manufacturing pathway. So you can end up vice president manufacturing of a major corporation and having started as a model railroader when you were young. So to me, there's a tremendous potential for young people as modelers. And I do think whether they stay modelers for careers doesn't make any difference, but the education they get, the confidence that they gain in their own abilities, and being able to build something with your hands, I don't think there's any substitute for that. I think that's one of the greatest things that we can possibly give young people in our hobby.
Yeah. I think it's a good...
That's my soapbox, guys. Well, listen, fellas, thank you so much for being here this evening. I think we've all learned a lot about On30. You're most welcome back anytime, and I hope you will come back. And to the young members of the family, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We thoroughly enjoyed seeing you and hearing you, your part of the presentation. Steve, thanks so much. I really do appreciate it. And we'll be talking.
Okay. Thank you.